I'm sorry, I'm a bit arrogant. We have a top manager.
Let me talk.
I think I'm a special one.
Time to go! Let me talk.
Everywhere you go, there's meat pies, and I'm surprised that Americans haven't embraced this, because this could be like the greatest thing on earth.
You are now listening to The Hat Trick with the Meat Pies podcast, your podcast for most things footy and few things pie. This is Gabe, and here on The Hat Trick, our guests will be joining us, bringing with them the three most important games, most impactful games, most meaningful games to them, and games that they played in, games that they attended, games that they watched. We got a really special guest here to kick things off. It's actually our very own Loic. California Relish, as he's been come to be known as. And yeah, I mean, Loic, I don't even have to say thanks for coming on, because you're on.
I mean, I'd love the thanks
anyways.
though. You know, I always appreciate the praise, but that's okay.
And if the people don't know you by now, then where you've been at for the past few months. But also at the same time, I feel like this is this is kind of, we want to take this opportunity to have everyone get to know sort of the host and the correspondents of the Meat Pies podcast a bit better. We've been doing this for a little while now, but I think we realized we haven't really formally introduced ourselves. And I think maybe this will also be like a fun opportunity for us to get to know each other a bit better too, even though, I mean, a bunch of us have like lived together and like we've known each other for a while now, but I'm sure there'll be stories that we've never heard before. This
is gonna be a nice. I'm excited for this series. It's gonna be a nice little intimate series. I feel like every game is memorable in some way, right? And I feel like making this list of three, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm going to make honorable mentions at the end, but this list of three was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because there are just so many great footy stories. But I wanted to highlight three games that kind of felt like they emulated a well-rounded perspective of my footy career. So I'm excited. I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear it as well. Especially, I cheated and stole you because you were kind of like the certified baller of the podcast, I do have to say. I mean, Nico and Paul have had very respectable playing careers as well. Nico's quite a talented player as well, but I think you're clear cut the biggest baller of all the Meat Pies. We're all into the game, and I mean, I know I could have carried my career well on into glory and stardom, but
Savannah Country Day days. I would have loved to see Gabe in his Savannah Country Day days. Yeah,
bro. I mean, well, just a little preview for when Forrest and I sit down, and Forrest does the same for me. I'm sure there'll be one Country Day match joined there, probably. I'd like to think, but this is about you. This isn't about me. And yeah, why don't we just go ahead and kick it off? I'm really curious to hear about where you're going to start things off. I know this game has been a part of your life for a really, really long time, but what's this first match you're bringing with you?
Okay, so number one, and it might start off sounding a little cliche, but 2006 World Cup final, France versus Italy, the infamous Zidane headbutt. And to me, I think I must have been 8 at the time. Yeah, I think I was 8 or turning 8 that year. So 7. And San Francisco had set up the city for this World Cup final by having North Beach, which is like, for our listeners who don't know San Francisco, it's like the Italian cultural center of San Francisco. That was where all the Italy fans went. They all went to Washington Square Park in North Beach to watch. And all the French fans went to Dolores Park. And they had this huge screen in the middle of the park. It was like a gorgeous sunny day, like 78 degrees out. The park was packed with maybe the most French people I've ever seen in one place ever. And I just remember the like pure drama to an extent that it literally scared me because I was like a 7-year-old and I mean, we had like French fans, like when Italy scored a goal, like I don't know, it felt like they were all threatening to beat each other up as if it was their fault. And it
Yeah.
was like, at the time, it was like terrifying. Looking back on it, it's hilarious. But
Yeah.
it was also like one of the first times I ever saw my father cry, like after the Zidane headbutt. That was like the whole crowd was just dead silent. And then I think it was Trezeguet who skied his pen to lose it. And um that was a dramatic moment. And me, like little like 7-year-old me is like sad, but I'm mostly like scared because I'm like, what are all these like French people gonna do to me if I like say something wrong? So that's number one. I feel like that's like one of the most memorable viewing experiences I had, like of a screen and being in an environment and actually like going somewhere and making an event out of watching a game and doing it with my dad, who was wearing his like old Zidane jersey, his friend Jean-Michel and his other friend Laurent, who all had berets. Like I swear like it was the most stereotypical French thing ever. I think we got a picnic blanket and they had wine and cheese and baguette. And it was also like really cool to see like that many French people in one place.
Yeah.
And you know, we were kind of situated in a way where we couldn't even really watch the game. So it was like I didn't really even understand what was happening on the pitch. But what was really cool was just the general environment. And I think it kind of taught me how much passion there is in the game from an early age, even in places where it's not like centralized. So yeah, that's numero uno.
Oh, way to kick it off. I mean, that's like the most infamous, famous, dramatic, whatever you want to call it, match probably of our lifetime. That's the first match ever talked about in this hat trick series that hopefully will go on for quite a long time here in the Leapies podcast. So it's quite the way to kick it off. And I will have to say, I cried after that match too. I think I talked about it with Matthew Chang, who was one of our first guests on the podcast, because he was over at my house watching. And yeah, I was probably 8 because you were 7, and I cried. So yeah, very dramatic match. But also, like, do you want to talk a bit? I know we've had a lot of Fabrice talk on the pod, and I mean, we had John McDermott on the pod, just legendary photographer, lifelong friend of your father's. But I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about like San Francisco and the scene there as well. But do you maybe want to just talk a bit more about like your sort of triangular relationship with like football and your father as well? Who I know is like there's also an awesome guy. I've been lucky enough to meet the fam, and I'm a huge Fabrice fan. But yeah, maybe just like tell us a bit more about your dad and getting introduced to the game by like a pure French football fan.
Yeah, Fabrice is quite the character for our listeners. Fabrice, you know, he himself was born in like a small western coast town in France called La Rochelle. And like, you know, growing up in France, like, you know, here in the US, you go play hoops or like you go, you know, toss a football. Like there, it's like you play rugby or you play soccer. And so, you know, and I think anyone who's grown up with like European parents in the US probably has like a similar experience of footy is just everything, right? I kind of remember growing up, like going to this, you know, school in Pacific Heights in San Francisco. And like, there were only 4 of us who loved soccer the way we loved it in a class of like 45 or something. And we used to get like low-key bullied for it because I think there was this weird sort of like I like hesitate to use the word xenophobia, but there's something like foreign about football in this context. And like I don't know, people would make fun of us for like playing the game where like, you know, it's viewed as like a pussy sport, or pardon my language, a, you know, wimpy sport where people dive. And yeah, it was always interesting. So like my dad always was kind of like that main figure who introduced the game to me. Like I think my first memory of kicking a ball was just at the field down the block from my first home that we ever lived in, and just like him, like I literally like have the image. And he was like one of my first coaches. He coached my U8 through U10 teams. I'm not gonna lie, I really hope he doesn't hear this, but he's a bad coach. So
He'll probably hear this.
yeah, and he's also, I mean, like growing up, I started to like advance through the game and play more competitively and start to go to these academies, like having him on the sideline was just so much pressure. Just because I like definitely wanted his approval, right? Like you always want him to like see you playing well. And the thing about Fabrice was he was never gonna tell me I played poorly. He was always gonna be like they should have played you the ball. Like you were open, like you're always doing well. And I always thought that was really sweet, even though like if I'd look on the sideline, if the team messed up, like he'd be like in a fit, like in an absolute fit, like storming off. Him and my buddy Charlie's dad was kind of the same way, where like, oh my God, you just hear them on the sideline, like, Charlie, get rid of the ball. And every parent would just be like shrieking, like just absolutely shivering with fear from my dad and Charlie's dad. But my dad just came off as aggressive, like he never actually was. I don't know about Charlie's dad, quite frankly. But yeah, so that's like a little bit of Fabrice. And like, we grew up playing together. He kind of stopped kicking around after he started working a lot. But every time we talk on the phone now, which is like, once a week, it's like, oh, what are the Gunners doing? Why are they so bad right now? So yeah, that's a little background.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll get even more Arsenal chat and San Francisco chat and whatever as this continues. So I'm curious to hear where we can go from here. It can only go up from 2006.
It can. Final. So number 2 was so it was the first European football match I'd ever been to in Europe. Because I'd previously, like, the US does this thing, whatever, International Champions Cup. I don't even know what it is, quite frankly. But Juve came and played the Toffees here in San Francisco. I went to that game. It was when Pirlo missed a pen, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, Pirlo missed a pen."
That was I think that was one where John Stones Panenka. And like
yes.
like the Pirlo Panenka, I didn't know you were at that match. That's really funny, actually. That's like that lives in Everton lore. Because after that, everyone was like, "Oh, John Stones, like he's the greatest thing since sliced bread." And like anytime people like, if he was like not good for Everton, but anytime anyone like he was really young. Anytime anyone like reminisces about like John Stones in an Everton jersey, like that clip always comes up. Sorry to interject, but it's just like great. Really funny that you're at that match.
So yeah, no, that was, I mean, and it was like from what I remember, it was entertaining, but it was like, that was my first exposure, I guess, to, like actually like European level football, because I'd only gone to MLS games. But the game I want to talk about was I had the privilege of going to Tuscany for like a couple weeks, I think summer of 2016. And I went with, like my 2 best friends from kindergarten and like one of their families, and it was fantastic. Like the family rented out a villa for us in Tuscany, and then his mom surprised us and bought the 3 of us and her and one of the other family members tickets to Fiorentina versus Barca in Florence. And we like went to the stadium, and it was like so beyond electric. Like I still actually, hold on, I'm gonna grab this. I just found this the other day. Sorry, I'm off video, but
no, you're good. Is it your kit?
Well, I will also show my kit, because I bought that kit at a flea market in Siena before the game. It was like an authentic version of the kit, and they were selling it for like 25 euros, which was sick. But I still found the ticket from the match.
Nice.
Yeah, my mom sent me like a box of like my little beloved knickknacks, and that was in there. But yeah, we had phenomenal seats. Like we are opposite the supporters end. So, you know, you're like actually just looking at the supporters end, and like Italian fans are crazy. I mean, I think every fan is crazy at the end of the day, but like Italian fans are pretty nuts, and
Yeah.
specifically Fiorentina fans. Okay, some of the memorable things. We had these great seats, like, you know, 3 rows off the sideline, so we got a phenomenal view. I think Barca ended up winning that match like 3-2. But I just remember being so blown away by, like, actually you kind of like start to see like a physical manifestation of like intelligence on the ball. And when you actually like see that for the first time, you kind of think like, wow, that's the goal. Like, I think growing up playing in the US, you never get the chance to see that level of skill and that understanding. Not to say that, you know, American soccer isn't great, but like growing up for us, like it was never gonna ever achieve what the Prem does or what La Liga does or what Serie A does.
Yeah.
Watching like Ivan Rakitic as a midfielder was quite literally the most astonishing thing I'd ever seen. Watching Luis Suarez like press a defender, I would be shivering out of my socks if he was running at me. He's a large guy. Like I remember really remembering like he is so much bigger than TV makes him look.
Yeah.
I remember that was Federico Bernardeschi's breakout season for Fiorentina, and it was like right before he signed with Juve, and I just remember being like, wow, who's this Bernardeschi guy? He's incredible. And yeah, it was just a phenomenal night. It was like a warm summer night in Florence.
What was it, like a friendly? Was it like a?
It was
like
International Champions Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a summer friendly, and it was just like the feeling. I think what also really made it memorable was like growing up, like I said, I was always sort of like one of the only kids in my K-8 class who loved football, and I was with my 2 friends who, you know, they don't play. And I think it was really, I just like was very grateful for the opportunity to go, because it was clearly like having way more of an impact on me than them. But even like looking around and seeing how astonished they were as people who, like, one of them doesn't even play sports, like, you know, to see sort of the appreciation of such mastery of the game was just so exciting. My only disappointment was because it was like a friendly, they weren't playing Messi, they weren't playing Neymar, which I honestly think I would have, after watching this Neymar doc, I think I would have rather watched Neymar than Messi, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah, it was just magical.
Well, and especially in a city like Florence, that obviously like culturally is so rich and such a beautiful city, but also like they really care about their football there, and so to have sort of all those elements like combined for your first match in Europe must have been pretty special, because like just culturally it's such a rich city as it is, but when you throw into like the football sort of pedigree as well, I'm sure like that must have just felt, as you said, magical, like on another level.
Yeah, it also, I also kind of remember being like struck by the knowledge that the average individual in Florence had about the game. Like we were, I think the 5 of us sat down at a restaurant before the game. We had to park super far from the stadium because, I mean, the city was going crazy. It was the only place that you could find parking on, like, you know, some cobblestone street, like in the middle, like, you know, outskirts of the city center. Sit down at this restaurant, and like I'm wearing my Fiorentina jersey that I just bought, and like they were like, "Oh, are you guys going to the game?" And we were like, yeah, we have tickets. And they were like, "Oh, you know, what do you think about this tactical change from like blah 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 blah?" And I was just like, "You are a waiter, like how do you know this much as a waiter?" And I think it kind of made me realize, like, wow, the understanding in other parts of the world is just like beyond what people in my community know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, and it will live down. I mean, because as of now, it's like really the only European game I've like ever been to, but it's reminding me of like sort of the goals of like getting to Europe and like being able to make going to matches kind of the way you're going to matches, like just a part of like my everyday or like every month routine, you know?
Yeah. Once we get that bag, once we get that podcast bag, some of that YouTube money, meat pies will be global, will be international.
I'll call up Joe Rogan and ask him how he makes his funds.
Once all of us move to New York and then we or DC and they get the turbo hyperjet going, whatever, the ultrasound, not ultrasound, I don't know, whatever. They get that they get that ultrasound jet where they put it on your belly and they
they launch you over.
Yeah. Once we can fly real fast, we'll be over at matches all the time.
Yeah, facts.
Yeah. But who knows? Maybe we'll have a Premier League team in New York soon enough here.
That's true.
Do a little exchange with the NFL.
Yeah. So that's that match. Should I jump to number 3?
Pretty sick. Yeah. I want to hear it. See if you can pull off the perfect hat trick. We got right foot, we got left foot. See if we can knock the header in.
So number 3 is a game I played in.
Here we go.
And so, okay, for our listeners, you know, I grew up in the Bay Area, and oh, okay, man, now it's making me think if I should choose this other game. No, I'm gonna stick with this one. I'll make the honorable mention in a sec. But grew up playing for this team. We were originally called PSG. We wore French jerseys. Quickly turned into the San Francisco Seals, which turned into a bigger club in the Bay. But I eventually knew I wanted like more of a challenge. San Francisco Seals was not playing in like that tough a division. And I knew there was this club in Marin County, Marin FC, that was kind of elite. And, you know, so I went out and tried out and was really grateful to make it. And it was, I mean, that sort of was like my high school club that I thought, you know, was kind of usher me into playing in college, and then decided not to play in college. But Marin FC, we like kind of balled, not gonna lie. We were pretty sweet, and you know, we went to tons of tournaments. At one point, I think it was our U16 year, we were state champs. That's one of my honorable mentions, is our 8-2 state championship win. Separate game. It was pretty lit. But this game, it must have been like early November of our U17 season. And there was a tournament that we went to called the Las Vegas Mayor's Cup. Pretty big tournament. You know, people from, you know, teams from across the country, really talented teams. And we played our first 3 group games. And, you know, I don't really remember the sequence of games and how it went, but what I do remember is we were completely tied for the wild card spot with a team from another group, like completely tied on goal difference, points, goals for, goals against. It was crazy. The only solution that they have for that in these tournaments is a penalty shootout before the first knockout game. Like literally right before.
That's so random.
It's so random and it's so terrible. So what happened was it might not have been a wild card. It might have been for the first place spot. It was something weird. Okay, besides the point, logistics aside, we had to go into this penalty shootout. And
had you played them yet?
No, we didn't play this team yet. Actually, maybe we did. It kind of feels like we did. We so did. We played them in our 3rd game. This is what it was. It wasn't the wild card spot. It was, we were completely tied for first in our group. That's what it was. Completely tied for first in our group. So we had to go to penalty shootouts to decide who was going to get first in the group. The thing was right before, wait, getting my bearings. No, we found out, like both teams found out that the team that whoever got first in our group, so it was basically like whoever got first in our group was going to play second in like group B or whatever.
Okay.
Group B had this team called Padiadores. And Padiadores was a team from SoCal. They had 3 teams from like across the region, but it was like their Blanco team that was at the time the best team in the country. Like they were ranked number 1. They'd won nationals. They were so unbelievably filthy. And this was not the first time that our team had played them. Like we'd played them in the San Diego Surf Cup, which is like a huge tournament down in San Diego. And we lost to them in the semifinals of our U16 season, like 3-1 or something. But they're a phenomenal team and no one wants to have to play them. So the penalty shootout, the team that we were playing was this like really cheeky team. I think they were called like the Vegas Aztecas. They like intentionally threw the penalty shootout. They intentionally kicked every single ball at our keeper or to the side so that they wouldn't have to play Padiadores, because Padiadores ended up getting second in their group. So we were like, what do we do? Do we like also try and throw the game? Like, no, right? We're going to just be the bigger team and win this shootout and just go play Padiadores. We ended up beating Padiadores in the quarters, which was crazy because they possessed like motherfucking Barcelona around us and like they were insane. But we just got like an early pen in like the 10th minute and just like ground it out. And winning that game was like probably one of the most epic nights of my life. Then we ended up making it to the final. And the other team that made it to the final was the Las Vegas Aztecas. And we played them in the final. And we go to penalty shootouts. And we lose.
Bro, you can't lose.
It was such daggers. Like I remember I played like the full 120, or I guess at that, yeah, no, it was like we were playing 80-minute games plus, 20-minute, 10-minute half extra time. So I played the full 100 of that final. We go to this penalty shootout and like they just made every single one and we missed like 2. And it was.
Did you take one?
Yeah, I made mine. Don't worry. I have a history with penalties where I think I've only missed 1 penalty in my entire life. I got the opportunity to do a retake. This is a funny story also, tangential from the Vegas game, but it was my high school semifinal, like it was like North Coast section, like semifinal game. And we went into pens. And I used to do this run up where like, if here's the ball and here's me, I would do like the largest curl, like a full like 180 curl and approach it from the side. And then it always worked for me before, but on this occasion it didn't work. And I like completely telegraphed it and I miss, and I'm like walking back and the ref is like, oh, keeper stepped off the line, you can retake it. And we had this British coach, his name was Gavin Birmingham. I think he played in like 6th division, he played in the FA Cup in England, kind of cool. But he like looks at me and just goes, Loic, don't you ever do that fucking run up ever again. And then I slotted it straight down the middle and that was fine. But yeah, back to the Padiadores game. Like I guess that's not necessarily like one game, it's like a span of like 2 plus a penalty shootout, but it was crazy. It was just absolutely bonkers.
You went and played them like right after you did this like first penalty shootout?
So we did the first penalty shootout with this team and then we went straight to playing Padiadores. Like there was like a 10-minute warm-up period.
It was good though, because like you had the momentum from the penalty shootout, see the ball go in the back of the net.
And I think that game taught me like about the football gods, because
yeah,
I think
which
it was
is
just
not really
karma.
though.
I mean, not
at
really.
the
Yeah,
end,
I
like,
know.
yeah, I mean, I guess the football guys aren't. They're not. They're like they believe in karma, but they're not just.
Yeah, exactly. They believe in karma, but they're not just. But it's pretty epic. And that tournament was a pretty cool tournament. Like the pitches in Vegas are like beautiful.
Oh, sick, yeah.
Yeah. I always kind of realized, like, as I grew up playing, like, and traveling across the state and traveling across the country to different places, like, these rural parts of the US have like so much capacity to have just like the nicest fields.
Yeah.
Oh, such a privilege, so clean. Um, so yeah, it's number 3.
So you touched on it like really briefly, and I think I've heard like a lot about this before, but you may want to tell people, like, how did you come to the decision to ultimately like go to UW and not pursue soccer further? Because I've played with you a little bit. I've watched you play a decent amount. I mean, we like to give you a hard time on the podcast because like you deserve it, but but and you're an Arsenal supporter, but like I tell people all the time, like you're maybe the best player I've ever played with. And like I've played with guys who have like played D1, like you're just so nice to play with. And maybe we haven't played together all that much, but I've also just watched you play a decent amount. And like you're just a baller, dude. Like you really are like such a baller. Like absolutely could have gone and played, at some places. Obviously, there are levels to this college soccer thing, but maybe just like talk a bit about how you sort of ultimately came to decision to stop playing. And I know you played club at UW and they're still playing
Yeah.
now and balling out, but
It's
it's tough for guys in high school.
It's a really good question. Well, first of all, Gabriel, I'm flattered. I'm flattered that you'd say those things about
That's
me.
it. No more compliments. No more compliments.
I'm kind of blushing a little bit, but yeah. So I guess to give our listeners like a little bit more of background. I mean, I grew up, playing for this club, Marin FC. It was really competitive, and we were playing with. I'd say by the time we all finished our high school career, 50% of us went on to play in college, and 30% went on to play D1. And I think, okay, so I think there's twofold here. One is like a bit of misfortune, and another is a bit of like hindsight, where as much as I loved playing for this club, I don't know if it was always the right environment for me, and I didn't always get the opportunities that I deserved. And it definitely shot my confidence a lot. Like, it was a club with a lot of wealthy kids who donated a lot of money to the club, and there was a lot of politics involved with letting certain kids play over me. And like, I was a kid who was on financial aid at the club. Like, my parents sacrificed a lot for me to play at this club. At the time my dad was working in Marin, and there were these days where I also at one period played on this like regional academy for the San Jose Earthquakes. It was like a North Bay area academy where they kind of select some of the best players from different clubs in the North Bay, and then Wednesday nights we drive up to Petaluma and have like training from 8 to 10 in Petaluma, which for people unfamiliar with the Bay Area, it's like an hour and a half north of San Francisco. So there'd be these days where we'd wake up really early, drive from the East Bay to Marin to drop off my dad at work. We had one car, and it was a 98 Honda Civic. So it was a little tank, just did absolute numbers. We drive from Alameda to Marin at like 5:30 in the morning. Marin to San Francisco. My mom would drop me off at school. My mom would go to work. My mom would pick me up from school in the afternoon. We'd drive to Petaluma from San Francisco. She'd wait in the car for 2 hours while I trained. Then we'd drive back down, pick up my dad, and drive back to Alameda. So, we'd be doing like 100 miles a day in driving, like crazy. And I always just like thinking about that, like I definitely put in more work because I knew I wasn't getting the opportunities I deserved. When the summer that we won, or the spring we won state championships, we qualified for nationals. And that summer during our break, like our coach gave us this really intense workout regimen to do in our off season. And then we did like a 2-week boot camp before nationals and Surf Cup. And I followed that to a T. Like it was the fittest I'd ever been. And I was like, I'm going to play. Like, I'm going to play in these tournaments. We went to nationals. I got maybe 15 minutes of playing time across 3 matches. And a lot of the guys on the team were always like, why is Loic not playing? Like, he's clearly the one who's most committed. And I just don't think it was always the right environment for me, because I was never I think I was one of the more like responsible players on the team, but I was never a guy who was going to like advocate for myself in like an aggressive way. I was never like loud. I was never, a cocky figure. And there were a lot of sort of bigger headed figures on my team that were really skilled, and also like their parents like paid a lot of money for them to be at the club, and like the coaches felt the pressure to play them. So in that light, like I don't know if I always got the playing time I deserved, which meant I didn't really get the exposure I felt like I really wanted. And I didn't really get the game time to really solidify my game at that point. And then I really started to burn out, because I was playing, three trainings a week on top of that, the Earthquakes Academy training. So 4 trainings a week, 2-hour trainings a day, and then weekends, games and tournaments. And it really takes a toll when you like train that hard and then struggle to get on the pitch. And especially when you like really show up in training. Like, I think I was always one of those players who was always going to show up. I always wanted to get to work, and kids would goof around and they'd be the ones causing us fitness as punishment. And I was always the one who's just like, let's get it together. Can we stop this? So I feel like that was an aspect of misfortune. And then also, by junior year of high school, I just was getting to the point of burnout where I was like, I don't enjoy this anymore. I think a lot of players go through that, where you're playing so much and you're not really seeing anything come to fruition necessarily. And you just get major burnout and you just lose your passion for the game. And that just really happened to me. And then at the same time that I lost my passion, like I got hit with a back injury, where I got a herniated disc that was pinching my sciatic nerve, and took me like forever to figure out what was wrong. Eventually had surgery like summer before senior year of high school. But injuries like definitely make you realize what you're missing. Kind of jumped back into it my spring of senior year and played some really good footy at that point. But after, junior year was when I was like starting the recruiting process. Like I talked to the coaches at Vassar College to play D3. I talked to the coaches at, I think, Wash U in St. Louis to also play D3, but I kind of was at this point of burnout where I didn't have the passion. And I was like, what's the point of playing D3 if I don't have the passion? So I kind of gave up on that. And then, but coming to UW, like, and I knew, and this was another aspect of it, I knew I didn't want to go to a small school. Like my high school experience was very intimate, very small. I knew I needed a change of pace. I really wanted to go to a bigger school. UW was obviously a phenomenal option. Like, as you know, it's the best school in the world. So like, why would we not go here? Obviously. And, but, I will say, like, we started when I came and I knew I wanted to keep playing at that point, went to the club tryouts. And me and my roommate Madison, we were 2 of the only 3 freshmen to make the A team on the club team. And it was some of the best I'd ever played. Like, quite frankly, I took that break and it was like the best tryout I'd ever had. And we had a great time with the club team, as much as it wasn't as competitive as sometimes we would have wanted it to be and structured. Like, we had a really good team. We went to nationals down in California twice, like had really fun times, and here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like kind of a perfect story that encapsulates like some of the structural issues of football in the States that we've been talking for a while about now, that a lot of older players now are starting to talk about and expose. I mean, like, the kind of famous Zlatan like talks and quotes about these issues when he moved to the States and putting his kids in the footy. So I think it's really interesting sort of hearing about like those sorts of stories, and seeing that we still have like a long way to go to develop like players and talent in this country, and to give people like game opportunities. Because obviously, like, you train, but like you trained ultimately like to play in games. At the end of the day, like as much as like we love whatever sport you're doing, and we like I wouldn't be able to play a sport if I didn't like practicing it. That's why I quit like American football, because like everyone, I just looked around and it was the same thing for me. Even just in middle school, everyone just lived for the games, and everyone hated practice so much. And I was like, why? If I'm spending 85% of the time practicing and 15% of the time playing games, why would I play the sport when I absolutely despise that 85%? But at the end of the day, we do practice for the games,
Right.
and so it's tough when you're not playing. But I was sort of wondering, like, you're not, and we can maybe move on to some of your honorable mentions in just a moment, but you're not like the most athletic like figure that I've ever like, you're just not like athletically built like maybe some other people who have played a sport at a really high level. And for those out there who have only just heard Loic's voice and never met the man himself, I mean, he's still just an absolute stud. And
to be fair, I've been going to the gym a lot recently. I'm getting bigger, but
you would shrivel in his golden presence. But
this 5'8" dad bod is just money.
But I was wondering if you ever felt like when you showed up to tournaments or games or even like trainings or tryouts, that or even now, like when you're playing rec and club, if you feel like underestimated when you show up places, or if you've ever received comments before, or if you think it helps you in a way because you're a bit like unassuming before you step out there.
That's a good question.
It's not something you've thought about much before. I don't know.
It's never. That's honestly a really good question. I mean, that was definitely like a concern of mine growing up, because a lot of the guys you go against, a lot of the guys who do get recruited, especially in the States, like, are guys who are athletic, right? Like, going to playing college, like, first thing I think that a lot of coaches are looking for is athleticism.
We had sorry to butt in, but Alistair Johnson like spoke a lot about that, being one of the smaller guys growing up and having like a hard time getting recruited to bigger academies because he was just small. Yeah, exactly.
And I definitely think people would estimate my skill level and like my ball control, because I do that's sort of what I pride myself on, is sort of my vision and ball control and tight touches. And I can't remember any specific comments, but I did always kind of notice it with a lot of the guys on my team, where I was always a little heavier set. And a lot of guys on the team were either skinnier or taller, or, more muscular. I always kind of grew up being like, soccer's my exercise. Like, I swam for a bit, right? And when I was swimming and playing soccer, like, that was definitely like really good for me. But, when I just decided to commit my life to soccer, like, that was my workouts and I got fit from that. And I always kind of noticed it for sure. But at the same time, I do think people underestimated me a lot. When I play in the middle of the park, I really try and be as composed as possible and make the smart movements. And I think that's where I thrive. The difficult thing playing now, and I actually just had this conversation with Maddie, my roommate, is when you get beyond the point of playing with other super skilled players, or like players that you've been playing with for a long time, because my club team, Marin FC, we got to a point, we played with each other for 4 or 5 years, right? We understand movement. We're coached to play a certain way. Really wish this would be not on my face.
I haven't said anything about it. I've been locked in. I get a nice view. I get a nice view of the back of your head too here with the mirror behind you.
All right. But chemistry is like really big on the pitch, right? And chemistry also comes from like a general understanding of like what works in the game and what doesn't. And when you start to play nowadays, like the patience of the game doesn't really exist sort of at the level I'm playing at right now. Like I'm playing in GSSL, which is a league here in Seattle with it's like an adult rec league, but some of the teams, a couple of teams are really skilled. Like I think I told you guys in the chat the other day, like we played these guys who were semi-pro like 2 years ago. They were phenomenal players. They were definitely more athletic to some extent, but even like the non-athletic ones just did everything really quick and intelligently. On our team, it's sort of like, the idea that you have to break down a defense with your passes does not render in the same way that it renders for me. And I mean, I was even thinking about this. It was like a high thought in the shower, actually. I was like, dribbling's like pretty illogical. Like it's a pretty illogical practice to do in game. Like, because we had this moment in our last game. Basically, like I was playing like a 10/false 9. I made this run from sort of center of the park out wide into the right channel. Maddie played a ball from center back into that right channel, and I thought I was offsides, but they didn't call it, and all of them were like yelling offsides, and they didn't call anything. So I had the ball kind of like, I'd say 10 yards out from the side of the box, and I had all this space to dribble into, but I look up and I see 4 defenders, one of our short strikers in the middle, and I have the ball, and I'm like, I'm good with my feet, but I can't take players on one-on-one sort of at that pace.
Yeah.
And I was like, this makes no sense for me to dribble in right now. Like it's just like it would be a silly decision to dribble in right now. And I ended up dribbling in and firing a ball across the box. It was a good ball, but we just had no one in the box. And I kind of thought about this, and I was like, this is the level of intelligence that I saw when I went to Europe and like watched those players. And when I did my tournaments in Denmark and Sweden, which I'll make an honorable mention about in a sec, but that was the thing that really made the European team so much better, is like just the logical decision making of like, this makes no sense for me to do right now. Why would I do it? So, I think that's sort of like a level of intelligence I think I've always had as a player that a lot of people around me didn't. But hopefully I can play with that again soon.
Well, if you like passing and not dribbling, I got this guy for you. Pep Guardiola. I think I really like him. Actually, funny though, because like if you would watch City, they play a ball over the top, and they don't have a whole lot of tall players in the box usually. And like a lot of times Raz or Jack or whoever will get the ball out wide, and they'll look in the box and they'll be like, nah, and they'll just turn around and pass it right back, and they'll have like space in front of them. And so I think definitely a lot of top like clubs and players and people who play for top managers see that same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But dribbling's sick though.
I mean, dribbling is sick, and when you can pull off a skill move, it's fire. It's just like we're not all Neymar, right? Like and that's what bugs me the most, is when people like think they can do that and they just don't have that skill at all. One of my footy pet peeves, but I do want to get around to some honorable mentions.
I don't know if we're gonna make this like a thing or not. I'm gonna have to think about this, but we'll allow it. We'll allow it for the first one. I was saying before the pod, I texted in the group. I said that this would be like an Arshavin performance. You'll be like holding up like the floor afterwards, like shaking your head.
That was one of my honorable mentions, was the Arshavin 4 goals.
Bro, that is okay. Wait, you can go whichever order you want.
Okay, well, I'll just list a couple. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but one of them is the round of 128 game that I played at the Gothia Cup in Gothenburg, Sweden, against Hook Football Club from Denmark. It was a fire game on like the cleanest pitch I'd ever played on. It's like a beautiful sunny day in Sweden. Just like I saw a video of it the other day and I was like, this is just like amazing. Like everything
Is it on
about this is
YouTube?
amazing. There's like a 12-minute clip on YouTube. I'll send it to the chat. I don't think I have many,
I need to see
many
it.
appearances, but yeah, we
I
have like
need
a
to see
couple
that.
videos. We have a couple videos from the Dana Cup in Friedrichshafen and from the Gothia Cup in Sweden. For context, like Gothia Cup is considered like the Youth World Cup, so it's just like massive, and like the round of 128 is the first round out of the group stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you made it out of the group stage.
We made it out of the group stage, won that game in the round of 128, got knocked out in the round of 64. And also, what was it? We made it to the final of the Dana Cup, but got smacked 3-0 by this wet German team. So that was that. Another honorable mention was the final of that tournament, the Gothia Cup. We watched it at the stadium in Gothenburg, and it was some Swedish team playing the Chivas Youth Academy. The Chivas Youth Academy won the final 7-0.
I bet
They went the whole tournament. They scored 62 goals and conceded 2.
Yeah.
They were absurd. It was so incredible to watch. And then last honorable mention, Champions League night, Arsenal 2, Barcelona 1. Jack Wilshere, absolute masterclass, bossing Xavi and Iniesta in the park. That was one of the most memorable games ever for me. That 2008 Arsenal squad was like maybe my favorite Arsenal squad of all time.
Do you actually have like memory of watching that game?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really remember where I was watching it, but I remember being like, everyone thought Barca was going to smack us, and quite frankly, like it was a classic game. Like Barca had all the ball.
Yeah.
You know, they went up 1-0, but I mean, when you have the likes of like a midfield of Jack Wilshere, Cesc Fabregas, and Alex Song, like that was a pretty baller midfield, and with Robin van Persie up top. Yeah. So that was, I feel like that was a lot of like the golden age of my upbringing with Arsenal, and kind of the players that I saw that I really admired, which is why I think Jackie Boy should get another run in the squad this upcoming round of fixtures, given our midfield shortage. But we'll see if Arteta does that.
Yeah, I mean, that was a full like 13 years ago. You know,
I know.
14 years ago. So
I know, but it was.
But yeah,
sick.
you never know. I mean, it sounds like he's been working hard. But no, so it is like interesting though to hear. We all kind of have on the podcast like our different generations of players from our favorite clubs that have sort of ushered in our fandom. And I think that's a Arsenal period that is a little bit like maybe less talked about, just because that's sort of on like the back end of so much greatness. So it is like, you know, we're all sort of around the same age, but like I said, all liking different eras like of our favorite teams players. So it's cool to hear about, you know, groups of players like that we don't really talk about so much, that we're still like such ballers and
such a legend,
such a big reason why we hate you so much for being the worst, most obnoxious Arsenal supporter that now. Actually, you're lucky because there's so many annoying, obnoxious Arsenal supporters out there. So it makes you look like a normal, not annoying Arsenal
I'm pretty
supporter.
obnoxious though. I'm pretty obnoxious. I'll own it.
No, when you have like AFTV out there, it makes you look like an angel.
That's true.
Sometimes.
AFTV is gold though. Let's be real. AFTV is gold.
Like, do you remember watching those games with Fabrice and those like Champions League nights or whatever? Obviously, like timing on the West Coast is a little more difficult. But do you guys reminisce about those Arsenal days?
I mean, yeah. I mean, growing up, it was always like waking, like every weekend morning before my games, it was like we're waking up, gonna watch Arsenal play, and then we'll drive over to the polo fields for my match. Like, I think that's like some of my favorite memories of like growing up in San Francisco is just like those Saturdays of waking up to like a sunny morning, sitting on the couch, watching the Gunners like watching like a Thomas Rosicky just like masterclass and being like, I want to be like Thomas Rosicky, go onto the pitch, like actually play on a sunny day, and then just have the rest of the day to just chill and hang out with your boys.
Get a burrito.
Get a burrito. Yeah.
I want a burrito right now. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I mean, we're gonna have to have Fabrice on at some point, Mammoth Legend.
I know. If he can ever figure out Zoom.
we'll help him. We'll help. But honestly, if I'm figuring out Zoom, I think he can work it out. But that's all I got. I mean, you got anything else that you want to tell the people out here?
No,
Damn.
just remember that. I don't know. Actually, I thought I was gonna have something cool to say. I just don't actually have something cool to end on.
If you dream it, you will herniate it.
Yeah. Don't herniate your discs, kid. It's painful.
Took 4 inches off Loic's life.
In the right place.
Okay, thank you for listening to this. What a way to kick off the hat trick. I think the hat trick will be here to stay. I really hope.
Go for it.
Obviously, I hope we can get guests on board and everything. I think it could be it could be a beautiful run for us.
And I think we'll have to eventually circle back to each of us, because I think we're all gonna have several hat tricks in our portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all watched so much footy, and in between, you, Nico, and Paul, and me a little bit, have played so much footy that I think we all have our stories, and we could probably do this 10 times over. So I agree. Yeah, we'll have to run this back somewhere down the road, especially once we're on 100,000 listeners a pod and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
And we have more and more people. We'll have to revisit some of these stories too. But these are going to be here to stay. I mean, that was kind of also the reason I wanted to do standalone interviews, was because now someone can go on Spotify, look up your name, and they'll hear this episode, and hopefully that'll be the case for each of the 5 of us. So I think it'll be really cool. Going forward. So thanks for being the guinea pig.
Oh, I loved it.
And thanks for listening to this installment of the Hat Trick Meat Pies podcast. If you like you heard, subscribe, follow wherever you're listening. Leave us a review if you're on Apple Pod or Spotify. Find Meat Pies podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. New episodes just like this one being released every Monday morning. Hat Trick's a little different. We're gonna have them kind of scattered throughout the next week or two. But stay on the lookout. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Meat Pies Pod. You can find Loic on none of those, because you can friend Loic on Facebook. Find him on Tinder in your local 206 area code in Seattle.
Soccer boys and girls, hit me up for dates.
And enjoy the rest of your week, and up the pies.
Up the pies.